John Fredericks Radio Network. Joining us now, Jill Vogel, Senator, Republican from Shenandoah Valley. Senator Vogel, thanks for being with us.
Good morning. It's been too long. I'm so happy to be with you.
Now,
and
Senator,
happy Good Friday.
That is Happy Good Friday and Happy Easter on Sunday, and I hope you'll be celebrating it with your family, but you have to have under 10 people. What happens to families that have like 10 children and then they got a family of like 12? What happens?
Well, I think you just have to put some outside on the front porch. I mean, there have been a couple of days when we've had a cousin come over and we might be just barely holding under our 10 number, but yeah, I have wondered that myself. I have a good friend who's one of 12 children, so I'm assuming that nobody's throwing them outside.
Can't have a family get-together. Senator Vogel, let's get to some of the items going on here in Virginia. Let's start with Governor Northam shuttering schools. Schools are closed until August, also putting off the primary election for 2 weeks and shutting down all non-essential businesses in Virginia until June 10th. He could perhaps relax that. But Virginia, way under what the projections had been for number of deaths, number of hospital beds due to the COVID-19 virus. Do we have an overreaction or not?
Well, I will tell you, John, it is my fervent hope that the governor will relax that June 10th deadline for, reopening the Commonwealth, or at least relaxing the stay-at-home order so that people can go back to their normal lives. And I believe that, all of the recent information that's been reported out in the last 2 or 3 days is showing that the numbers are way under what was reported initially. And if that remains the case, then I think it is absolutely malpractice, if both political and economic malpractice, if we continue to shutter businesses and continue, to push the economy on this downward spiral in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And for those of us who are elected office holders, it's our responsibility to speak out and to pay attention and to be vigilant. And the moment that we know that this is no longer a serious public health risk, it's our obligation to get people back to work. And the impact has been absolutely devastating on Virginia. And, this is not something where you can just flip a switch and these people who have lost their jobs, the businesses that have been shuttered, the folks who are, now filing for unemployment, you can't just flip the switch and put it all back. And so I believe that based on the responses that I'm getting from my constituents and the community that I represent, I think many, many people think that the cure is far worse than, the underlying problem here.
I agree with you 100%. Shutting down the economy and all the levers of production and shattering all these businesses and crushing small businesses, putting millions of Virginians out of work. This was all because we didn't want to overrun the hospital system, the healthcare system. We didn't want to run out of beds. So as of today, the number that need hospital care for the coronavirus in Virginia is 685. Now, we've got upwards of 10,000 available beds. So we're at under 10%, 8% of what the projection was. Here's my concern, Senator Vogel, and I hope you can address it. I've had Clark Mercer on my show, Chief of Staff for the Governor, 3 weeks in a row. Great guy, answers all the questions. But nobody in Virginia has given me a number that they're satisfied that they can reopen businesses. So there's no metric. The first metric they had was hospital beds. What they projected is about 10% of what has actually been taken up. So what is the number where we can say, hey, May 15th, we can all go back to work? What's the number?
Well, if you listen to what some folks in the national media and some of the physicians that are, constantly out there prognosticating about, basically breeding more hysteria, they're talking about, it's got to be down to zero. We've got to have these super low numbers before we can, put people back to work and open businesses and let people's lives return to normal. And I think that having artificially low numbers and extraordinarily high expectations for where we have to be vis-a-vis the healthcare system before we can let people return to work is is an outrage. And I can tell you, just as a constituent service matter, again, I think it's our responsibility as elected office holders to be looking out for the communities that we represent and holding us to very, very low numbers of new infections or, super low numbers of people in hospital beds is not practical. And if you just consider where we've been in the past with a bad flu season or other infectious diseases or H1N1, I mean, we've never, ever done anything like this to our economy. And that is not to say that this was not a serious pandemic and that this was not something that we should take seriously. But I cannot fathom a scenario where you would intentionally push the economy into such a downward spiral, knowing that frankly, the only solution to this problem is to get people back out in public and let people get immune to this virus that in many cases just people don't have symptoms at all, or where that in fact the vulnerable population or the older population are the people that should be sequestered. We should be caring first about them, but for the healthy population, we all have to be exposed and immunized. And just as you pointed out, Clark Mercer's point was the reason that we're stretching this out and artificially prolonging this horrible economic crisis in the Commonwealth is simply to flatten the curve and not let the hospitals be overburdened. But if the hospitals aren't overburdened, then I think it's our responsibility to say we have to jumpstart the economy in Virginia. We just finished a legislative session where we accomplished on our budget side some extraordinary things because of this Trump economy booming and generating enormous revenue for the Commonwealth of Virginia and giving us an opportunity for the first time to make some enormous strides in terms of funding. And, all of that, we're going to literally watch that all be washed out if we don't quickly act and get people back to work.
But there's no date certain. And that when June 10th comes, I don't care what the number is, that the governor is going to extend it. I mean, you can just feel it. Or there'll be we can have 5 people in a bar or some nonsense. They'll never give you a number because I don't know what they expect to do with this economy. Jill Vogel, we're with Senator Jill Vogel, Republican state senator from Shenandoah Valley. She was also a candidate for lieutenant governor in 2017 on the Republican side. Senator Vogel, you said you're talking to constituents, your small business owners in the Valley. What are they saying? What is happening to them?
Well, I think people are they were caught so flat-footed. I think the overwhelming number of people that I'm hearing from are in just terrible crisis. Their businesses are closed. They've lost their jobs. And I think that there is just this, I think people are just incredulous. I think they still just haven't been able to just take on board what's actually happening to them. And I have had very few people reach out to me and say, this is great. I wish we'd had a stay-at-home order sooner. That's just not what I'm hearing. Mm-hmm. People are calling and saying, can you help me with my P3 loan? Can you do anything to, reach out to the administration and make an exception for my business because I'm about to lose my business? Mm-hmm. I'm about to have to declare bankruptcy. Mm-hmm. These are people who've spent a lifetime building a small business who now in this Trump economy were reaping the rewards of all of that hard work. And to watch that just slip right away is just crushing. And so, to your point about when do we go back to work, I say we go back as soon as humanly possible. And I don't think we, wait for some arbitrary number or some arbitrary deadline when we suddenly, feel really good about it. I think we owe an obligation to our vulnerable population to keep them sequestered, but let other people go back to work and jumpstart the economy. People need goods and services. They need to have their elective surgeries. They need to be able to go back to work. And, I think that we are for sure putting people in such a terrible position that many of these people will not recover. And you ask about what people in the Valley are saying, or people in the Piedmont, or some of the folks in Northern Virginia who reach out to me, it is unanimous that, they are unanimous, and they're just pleading for, please put us back to work.
Jill Vogel, we have to get back to work, and it's got to be done in May. We've got 16 million people that filed for unemployment, over almost 17 million in 2 weeks. By the end of April, that's going to be up to, some people say, over 30 million, probably 30 to 35 million people will have filed for unemployment. That doesn't count the number of businesses that got under, and
Yeah.
people struggling to make ends meet. That doesn't even include them. You're going to have 20% of the economy of Americans unemployed. You're going to have, by that time, 10 million businesses that have gone under. We're not reporting the number of bankruptcies being filed now. There's 3 million businesses projected in the United States that can't make it to the end of April. You get to the end of May, that triples. You're going to have 9 to 10 million small businesses file for bankruptcy. They can't come back. It's over. Doesn't matter what the PPP is. That can get some through April. It's over. So they have no revenue. So you're completely destroying the small business space. You're putting millions of people out of work, tens of millions of people out of work. You're completely destroying the economy, and you've got available beds. So I don't understand why in the first or second week in May we just don't end this thing.
Well,
Why?
and
Somebody explain to me why.
well, if you talk to epidemiologists, they will tell you that the quickest way to have a virus go away is to have everybody exposed. Now,
Herd
clearly,
mentality.
again, exactly.
Herd
Immunize
immunity.
the herd. Right, exactly. And so let it spike, and then let it drop, and let it be gone. And the only way the virus is going to disappear is when we've done that. And again, I'm not advocating for taking our vulnerable population and exposing them, but certainly we can sequester them at the same time that we let the regular population go back to work. That's the only way that we get to the end of the virus. Full stop. And so if people are, taking credit for, the fact that we've sequestered every community and shuttered every business, that means we flatten the curve. Well, great, we flatten the curve. But at the end of the day, if our healthcare system can manage the numbers of people right now who are infected, who need access to health care, then by all means, I feel very comfortable and confident that we are in the zone where it's time to go back to work. And, people gave Trump a lot of grief for talking about April as a deadline. But if you look at the numbers, he is not far off. And, I read something that's a week and a half ago when they came out and they were talking about, you were mentioning those numbers. Something close to 47 million people could be unemployed. We can't manage something like that. And we've had horrible flu seasons. We've had H1N1. Never have we reacted in this way. And again, I'm not advocating for placing people at great risk, and I'm not suggesting that this was not a serious pandemic, but I'm suggesting that the cure is so devastating that there are people who will lose their jobs, who will not be able to feed their families, who will lose their health care, and perhaps lives will be lost and access to health care. Just the impact on families is so devastating that at a certain point you've reached the tipping point where it is far more important that we go back to work.
I'm concerned about what the objective is here because they keep moving the goal post on us. First it was don't overrun the system. Now it's too many people are dying. The next thing it's going to be is there's not enough tests. Then it's going to be there's not enough plasma. It's always going to be something. I don't understand why the Democrats want to keep business shut down and the economy shut down and put, like you say, 50 million people out of work. I can't for the life of me understand what's their end game.
I just can't fathom a scenario where any rational person looks at this and says running this out to its total, complete conclusion when there's 0 cases is in anybody's interest. It just doesn't make any sense. And we've never done that before when we've had other pandemics. And we've had, we had H1N1. In fact, I spoke to somebody at the health department and said, could you have imagined a scenario when you were dealing with a pandemic like this? And they said, yes, we can. We dealt with this before.
Right.
And it really
we got through it.
It was a very sobering moment there for me to think that through and realize you're absolutely right. And we dealt with that quite differently. And yes, I understand that H1N1 is different than COVID-19, but the response was so different in terms of the practical response from governments around the country. And the level of hysteria has made it far worse, I believe. and created a level of stress and anxiety among the population that I don't think is very healthy. And being given access to good information and access to good health care, and if we know that our hospitals are not being overburdened and that we have beds available, then I think we should be doing everything we can to give the public confidence to beat back that hysteria and to give people hope that, in a matter of, not much more time, we can return to normal life. People can't live without jobs. They can't go without food. And, there's just not enough social welfare available in this country to replace what's been lost. And we can't afford that kind of social welfare anyway.
You're on the John Fredericks Radio Network, Trucking the Truth Across America. We're with State Senator from Virginia, Republican Jill Vogel from the Shenandoah Valley in the Piedmont area. So, Senator Vogel, our concern now is, let's say the president at the end of April says, okay, we've had enough. We need businesses to reopen. We need to get back to work. We think we've flattened the curve. We're on the downside of it. There could be a resurgence, but we've just got to go forward so we don't completely destroy what remains of our economy. Here's the problem. It's now in the hands of these all-powerful governors who have declared all these state of emergencies, who have found out that by doing so, they have unlimited power. Unlimited. We got a governor in New Mexico today that hired a company to surveil your cell phones to be sure that you're practicing proper social distancing. That means if I kiss my wife Ann, they'll be alerted in Albuquerque or something. I mean, it's insane what we're doing. We've got Hogan in Maryland, who, if the police stop your car for no reason and you don't tell them a good enough reason why you're out, you don't have a paper in your glove box, you go to jail. I mean, they have this unlimited power. How do you stop it now?
Well, I think that's one thing that I will tell you. Some intelligent people have written me some really, really profound emails just to that point, talking about that this is just an unprecedented overreach and that folks on the other side are quite eager for government to cross a line that government in this country has never crossed before, where you have the authority and are freely willing to exercise the authority to tell people where they can go, whether or not they can leave their house, to monitor their cell phones, to tell them whether or not they can go to their office and work. It's your office. If you need to go to your own private office space and you feel like that's the only way that you can work and support your family, it's very difficult to think that you can tell somebody you can't support your family. And, we still have some freedom of choice in this country. We're still Americans. This is still a democracy. And again, I'm not taking anything away from an extraordinary health risk associated with the true pandemic. But at the end of the day, this is not having the impact that many people thought it would. We don't have a healthcare system that's been crushed by this burden. We don't have people set up in hospitals out in the street in tents the way people thought we might. And so I'm just suggesting that we be practical and that we be reasonable and that we do two things. Get people back to work. That's number one. And number two, don't let this be how people view government's role, that government overreach is somehow now the new norm. The government can make those decisions and exercise authority over your day-to-day life in a way that nobody would have ever tolerated in a normal environment. That is a scary thing and a scary next step that I don't think, Americans would want to or should tolerate.
That's where we are now. The erosion, the willing erosion, Senator Vogel, of our civil liberties is shocking to me. It's shocking. And I sit here on Friday, April 10th, on Good Friday, and I can't believe it. When the Democrats came in to the House of Delegates in Virginia and they tried to take away your guns, right? There was outrage in Virginia, right? We had the 50,000 person rally, and I mean, that was every day I was on it, and people were just so mad over it. But now we're letting these governors basically strip you of all your rights, and everybody's standing around saying, well, okay, I guess Governor Hogan is going to keep me safe by arresting me if I go outside. It's mind-boggling. I don't know how we've ever gotten here, but man, we got to get out of this really fast. Jill Vogel, I'm out of time for the day. I want to thank Senator Jill Vogel for being with us. We'll talk to her again before she goes back to the veto session on April 22nd. Senator, happy Good Friday, happy Easter to yourself
Happy Easter.
and your lovely family.
It was great to be with you. Happy Easter. Take care.